So far, we've learned that we can edit MIDI either by region or by notes or any of the controller information in the edit window. In the split window, we can edit notes and any of the controller information. We can't edit regions though. The third way to edit MIDI is through a dedicated window called the MIDI editor. And just like with the split, I can select a track or I can select multiple tracks. I'll select drums, bass, and clavinet. I can also do it by just selecting the titles. Let's do bass, clavinet, electric piano. And I can choose from the window menu, MIDI editor, or again, using the shortcut is the easiest way, Control equals. What I get is a dedicated window that looks just like what I saw in the split window, but it's a little bit bigger. I have an area for notes that I can change the colors of, just like I could in the split window. I can choose tracks. I can decide what track I'm editing by clicking the pencil or by choosing from my list here. I have my tools up here, solo and mute. I have my own dedicated grid, and I have a controller area that I can resize and add additional automation lanes. Now, one thing I didn't mention is that when you add a new type of lane, let's say I add MIDI pan, each instrument has its own lane, bass, clavinet, electric piano. And if I scroll up, you'll see the velocity is showing for all the instruments in one lane. Now I'm going to add, let's say, mod wheel, bass, clavinet, piano. And then here's my panning, bass, clavinet, piano. Every time I add a new category, it adds a lane for each one of my instruments. I can't delete one or the other. I can hold down Control. Remember, that makes one lane shrink down or change size. And I can shrink some lanes, but I can't get rid of, let's say, the clavinet and electric piano here unless I stop showing them. Now that I'm only showing my bass, I have one velocity lane, one mod wheel, one MIDI pan. As soon as I add the clavinet, I have bass and clavinet mod wheel, I have bass and clavinet MIDI pan. One of the great things about the dedicated MIDI editor is that I can have multiple MIDI editors open at the same time. Try saying that 3 times fast. So I will move this over here, or resize it. That's my bass and clavinet. And I'm going to deselect this target button. And now I'll open a MIDI editor by selecting electronic piano and pressing Control equals. Now let me resize this one. So now, if I bring up under Window MIDI Editors, bass and one other track, you can see the MIDI editor for the bass and the clavinet. You can see the MIDI editor for the electronic piano. Now let me go ahead and close my edit window. Go up to Window and choose Arrange Tile Horizontally. I can choose Tile horizontally or vertically if I have 2 windows open. If I have more than 2, I can still tile or cascade, which overlaps them. So here I see my bass and clavinet. Here I see my keys. I can change that to electronic piano. I can set this grid to 1 bar, this grid to half notes. I can zoom in really closely here, and I can zoom out all the way with this one. I can put this in slip mode and this one in grid mode. Each window is completely independent. And if I want to bring up another window, there are a couple ways to do it. Again, I could deselect the target button. The target button says which window is going to get the focus. When I press my F5 to choose zoom, is it going to be this window or is it going to be this window? So back to opening up a new MIDI window. I can deselect this, go back to my edit window, which I could also do by pressing Command equals, and choose, let's say, drums, and press Control equals. This time I will tile them. And you can see drums, bass and clavinet, electronic piano, and then my edit window. There's another way of opening up a new window too. I don't have to deselect the target. I can just right-click on the MIDI window, and I have many options, and one of them is Open in Untargeted MIDI Editor. If I choose that, a new MIDI editor will open with the same settings as this one, but not targeted. Target is turned off. So I now have another editor. And now tile has gone away because I have more than 4 windows. I can only cascade. So having this ability to have multiple windows open really makes it wonderful for working with MIDI. And you'll see that certain windows can be in notation while others are in MIDI piano roll. Let me show you that very quickly. I'll close all these. I will tile this horizontally. These are both showing me drums, but this one I'm going to change to notation. And now, drums is probably not the best thing to show. Let me do bass. So here's my bass in piano roll. Here is my bass in notes. And as I move around the screen, I can line these two up, and when they play, so it's also great to have multiple MIDI editor windows when one of them is set to notation and others are set to piano roll. And those are the new MIDI editor windows. So just to recap, I can always bring up my edit window or my mixer with command equals. I can bring up a MIDI editor window with control equals. I can bring up additional MIDI editor windows by either untargeting a MIDI editor window and pressing control equals again. There's a new window. Or right-clicking on the MIDI editor and choosing Open in Untargeted MIDI Editor, which will open another window. And of course, if I command equals back to my edit window, I also have the split window. So imagine if you had 2 screens, you could have edit, you could have MIDI down at the bottom, and you could have windows over here. Maybe this one is just showing me velocity and MIDI volume, and another one is showing me notation, and so forth. So a lot you can do with these multiple windows open at the same time, a nice new feature of Pro Tools 8. In the next couple lessons, we'll start to edit our MIDI notes.